Hello and welcome to the fifth episode of the Pirate Rugby Pod. Today we're going to chat about the big rugby news of the week, recap on all the Tier 2 results, and do a deep dive, into the emerging world of South American rugby, letting you know what to expect from the likes of Uruguay and Chile, this World Cup, and who the next nation to join the big boys might be. Hugh even tells us about the secret rugby team currently dominating Tier 2 rugby. If this is your first episode, you can come here every week to get the latest rugby Tier 2 news and broadcast news, as well as a closer look at a different topic each episode. If you like the sound of that, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
And if you want even more from the Pirate Rugby, follow us on Twitter to get updates on all the obscure games from across the world, or head over to our Substack, which we showed you in the last episode. There'll be a link to it down in the description. You can go there and find written up, long form content based on all the deep dives we do on the show, plus some other bits and bobs here and there, as well as Ender's TV guides. So jump on it if you like the sound of that. So kicking straight on then, Ender, what was your rugby moment of the week?
Well, I was going to choose Fiji, but to be fair, you were at the game, so I think I'll have to. Yeah, I won't steal your thunder there. So my other moment of the week was, I know you were traveling at the time, but if you had seen the Ireland v Samoa game, I'm sure you've seen the highlights. The winger, and for any of our Samoan listeners, do forgive me. First name Duncan, so I can get that. Last name Paiao. Basically, he scored a brilliant intercept try, but it looked like initially he had knocked it on, but the ball had actually come straight off his face. And thankfully, we had a world class ref in Wayne Barnes, ref in the game. So Wayne let it go. Your man won the length almost. I think he ran about 50, 60 meters and scored. And on replay, it did look initially like a knock on, but it actually, the ball just came off his face. And it was a brilliant score. Took his opportunity, and thankfully we had Wayne Barnes make a wise decision. And a lot of refs, I feel like, I know we discussed this previously, probably would have just blown immediately. But Wayne, I think, quite rightly so, just let it run through, let him score, and then let the TMO make that call with him.
Yeah, I love that from Wayne. He is very much like, we've got the cameras, got the replays, play on. Because you're right, so many refs would have just seen the ball hit the deck, because it did, didn't it? It bounced off his face and it hit the ground and then bounced up. So many refs would have just gone, knock on. But in rugby, if it comes off your face, it's not a knock on. So fair play to it. And then obviously Samoa took the lead with a scrum penalty going into half time. Unbelievable.
Exactly, yeah. In horrendous conditions, in front of a really hostile crowd. They certainly weren't shouting for Ireland, that's for sure. So let's hear about yours. So I think you've got a pretty unique story to tell this week.
Yeah, so I think we'll just jump into it. My moment of the week will also be our big news story of the week that we're going to kick off with, which is Fiji defeated England in a faster open game, the song nearly goes. So speaking of unfavourable conditions, it didn't come across on the telly, but it bucketed it down. It was literally, you could see lightning above the stadium. There was thunder, and the guy next to me goes, "Was that thunder, or was that something on the tannoy?" And it's like, no, it was thunder. So, but luckily, so I was very lucky. Shout out to Chris and Nye from Dream Team Rugby, who sorted me out with a ticket and sorted out taking me down there and things. So, Player Legends, Nye is the guy I spent all day with. Shout out to you, Nye, for listening. So I was with Nye, and we were right down by the front, and it started raining, and obviously we started getting wet, and it was getting cold and things, obviously. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do? And Nye's like, oh, it's all right. I've got 2 more tickets for up there, so we'll go up there. And we're like, what have you got? He's like, yeah, no, I couldn't give them away. People were sending me tickets saying, "Nye, do you want these?" Because I'm not going. So, and there was a lot of press in the build-up about Twickenham being potentially half empty. The official attendance was 56,000. The entire top bit of Twickenham was closed off. I think Wales's lowest attendance, just for context, like I think for the first England game this summer was like 65,000, which is like 10,000 less than the capacity of the stadium, but it's still like bigger than the Aviva in Dublin. So it shows what people think of English rugby, especially when you compare it to the game we'll talk about in a minute on the Friday night, which was a sellout, which was apparently 100% South Africa fans. So that's cool. But yeah, so I'll talk about the game itself, shall I? So yeah, my moment of the week is just feels like all the content that I put out recently on Twitter or talked about on here has either been about Fiji and how good they are, or about England and how bad they are. And getting an opportunity to be at that game and then witness that bit of history just felt like a convergence of the things that were happening. And yeah, it was up. I did not make any friends with Twickenham because I'm in a stand which is like all England fans, and I'm stood up on my own. And I don't look for Gene, and I'm stood up going, God, when they score the tries, and I'm losing my mind. And every time a decision goes slightly against Fiji or in the favour of England, I'm like, that's nonsense, ref. But yeah, but what a performance, mate. So you were watching it on TV. What did you make of Fiji's performance for all our Fijian fans?
I was just overall, and not to not to start England bashing, like I was just delighted for Fiji. And the most pleasing aspect of the game and of the result for me was that they completely and utterly deserved it. It's not as if it was a fluke or they got an easy score, or England made a silly mistake or something that they capitalized on. Like they really and truly, I think, deserved the win. And for me, seeing the set piece stand up, seeing the make the kicks, it was just so pleasing that it was just it seemed to me like a mature team playing a smart game plan. Like traditionally, you'd always associate Fiji with throwing offloads, running from the 22, poor discipline, all these things. But I think what we saw was a very mature performance, and we got a taste of what Fiji could be like if they got to play tier one opposition more regularly. But absolutely delighted for them. What a moment! Their first win against England in their home patch in horrendous conditions. Just delighted for
That
them.
made it the extra more impressive, didn't it? Because when England got their noses in front and then the rain came down, and I thought, oh, that's it. This is played into England's hands beautifully here. But no, it was the other way. And Fiji they grew as the game went on. And I like to talk about stats and the science of the game and things, but I was there for the warm up, and Fiji were warming up right in front of me. And I've spent so long researching these guys, I was getting a bit Star Trek. I was like, oh my god, that's Ikanavire, and he wasn't even playing; he was just there in the helping with the warm up. And I was like, oh, I spent so many hours reading your stats, mate. Holly Davidson was there running the touch as well, so I was a bit starstruck by that because I had Holly Davidson coming up and down in front of me. How she's not refereeing the World Cup, I've no idea. But yeah, so I was watching the warm-ups, and I was watching Fiji, and they were very business-like. They all had the game faces on. They're like, right now we're doing this, and they do an exercise. Right now it's this, and they would all go together, and they'd all go and do it together. And they'd be right now you're doing that, I'm doing that, and it was all really purposeful. And then I was looking down the other end. I was looking at England, and I was seeing players milling about on their own, just kind of chucking balls to themselves, like kicking balls around on the floor. Johnny May was practicing his kicks to touch on his own. There was no one even throwing the ball back to him. You had the famous Steve Borthwick ladder for practicing the throw-ins. And I was like, this looks like, if you had to tell me which one's the tier one and which one's the tier two, Fiji looked more organized. And you could see that throughout the game. There was an exit. I'm jumping around a bit here, sorry guys, but there was an exit on around the 65th minute where Fiji had a scrum on their own 5-meter line. Ball in, ball out, crashed it up, out to Muntz, who cleared it into the opposition half. It was like textbook, like dictionary definition of how to exit when you're under pressure. And like you said, that's not something that we associate with Fiji. And their post-meter contact work, the way that they get a big man running at a small man, and then they get a latcher to come on and then drive, and they're making like 10, 15 meters in one carry. I haven't seen any other nation that does that. Not even South Africa managed to execute that quite that well. So yeah, I completely agree with you. It's a bit like watching Japan in the 2019 World Cup when they had their group stage, and it wasn't like they fluked to win against Ireland and Scotland. They were the best team in their group stage, and Fiji were the best team on this day. And it was just, I just count myself so privileged to have been there to say, I was there when people talk about this game in the future, because they will.
Yeah. And exactly, what a game to be at. And it's such a last minute decision, you were telling me as well, like you got those tickets out of nowhere. So yeah, I bet you, did you see that coming? Like, Did anybody call this? Did you?
I
I knew they were
well,
with a shot, but you would think that England would just
yeah,
keep the pressure
the,
on and bring on their
the
bench
clues were
and
there.
close it out.
The clues were there, weren't they? Did I see it coming? I didn't think it would happen. I hoped it would happen, obviously. Um, there was a chance with it. I did think it was a no-win situation for England. I did think that there was no. If England lost, obviously it's the end of the world. If they squeak a win, it doesn't really do anything for them. And if they win by like 30, everyone will just say, "Oh well, it's tier 2 opposition. That's what you get." So I think Steve Borthwick couldn't really get anything out of this game. It was a no-win situation, and yet he still managed to come away with the worst possible outcome. So yeah, it's just, and it throws open that Pool C and Pool D even wider. So
Yeah.
people are talking about that being the lower quality side of the draw. It's lower quality, but it's high excitement. So you won't be able to miss a kick of those pools in the World Cup. Absolutely not.
And then moving on, like, is there anything else? Any other comments you have about that game? Because obviously, like, moving on now to the big rugby news of the week, like that is, for me anyway, and I think for you and for most people who might be listening, that was the biggest
Yeah.
piece of news of the week. Is there anything else you want to touch on, or any other conclusions? Like, where do you think England are now? Where do they go from here? What are their prospects? Was Brian Moore
England,
right? Will they get out of their group?
England is stuck. England, they're looking around. If they want to refresh their team, they can't. Borthwick obviously names his squad very early, and now he's picked up injuries, he's picked up suspensions. So it's like a lesson as to why you don't name your squad early. And he's called it now. He's called in Johnny May, and I forget the other guy who's been called in. He's called in someone else to replace. Obviously, Alex Mitchell had already been called in, but there's someone else I can't remember who. So he's got a squad full of players who are playing badly, players who he's already dropped and told that he doesn't think they're good enough, players who are out of form, players who are injured, players who are suspended. And it's not, I don't think it's just Borthwick. I think it's the RFU. Where do the RFU go from here? I found out the other day, Bill Sweeney, head of the RFU, gave himself a 55% pay raise the other day. Well, not the other day, a couple of years ago, which is the best part of £250,000 extra he awarded himself. 200,000, something like that. It's a bad look all over. It's a bad look all over. He's public enemy number one. They can't sack Borthwick. They can't have got him in for the Six Nations and then sack him. They certainly won't sack him now. And even if they sack him after the World Cup, depending on how well it goes, it will still be a bad optic because they can't honestly say that they've given him a chance. But I also think Borthwick has massively mismanaged his own situation. If you compare it to Gatland's, okay, Gatland's a lot more experienced, but Gatland has gone, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to make a brand new team with brand new players. Borthwick's gone, no, I'm going to take the same team and see if I can change them. And that is not a short-term plan. And he's tried to make it happen in the short term and it's just failed.
I think you're right, and one thing that we probably didn't touch on enough, and I do, you did bring him up briefly, but Muntz at 10 for Fiji, he is key for me because now Fiji, when they're in, when they have that, when they're putting that pressure on, they can actually turn their pressure into points, and that's huge for tier 2 sides. That's huge for teams who traditionally might have had maybe a poor, kick results or whatnot. Or so I think, like, when you look at Italy throughout the years, they always struggle to turn that pressure into points, or when so I think for me that's also really important, just again to bring up Fiji, that they have a 10 now who controls the game and who's able to slot his kicks. And I think that for me is absolutely key going into the World Cup. And then touching on the other big news of the week, we saw another crazy result this weekend, which was South Africa absolutely hammering the All Blacks. What conclusions can we draw from this, do you think?
I honestly don't know. Nobody saw that coming. When I saw the teams named, I thought the All Blacks had gone full strength, and I thought this Fox had experimented a bit. What conclusions can you draw? I don't know. I'm so steeped in, with the whole stuff that we've seen in the past with Razzie and we've seen with Eddie Jones as well. I'm like, did the All Blacks lose on purpose? Because there was one point in the second half where the All Blacks got into the box 22, and Ben Smith, it was like deep into the 22, and Ben Smith just not Ben Smith, sorry,
Aaron Smith.
Aaron Smith, just from a ruck, just hoists it into the air as high as he can. And I'm like, that is the least All Blacky tactic I've ever seen. So that makes me think surely professional rugby players wouldn't go out and lose that badly on purpose. It was a record defeat for the All Blacks. Scott Barrett is turning into Thomas Lavanini Mark II. Yeah, I don't know. What did you make of it, mate? I didn't see it coming, and the All Blacks were my favourite to win the World Cup. So, are they
a lot of
actually
people's
crap?
favourites.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, just completely shocked. Didn't see it coming. Reiterated South Africa's strength and depth. It's phenomenal, isn't it? Every position, even when you look at scrum half, the depth is insane. Libbok was great to see him put in a good performance and improve off the tee as well. I think we all know he's capable of that. We just know he can be consistent at times, but it was very good for him to get a run out. But you have to touch on the All Blacks, don't you? They were just so sloppy, poor handling skills, brilliant disciplined. Scott Barrett, I saw today, he's not going to get a ban, and they reiterated that it shouldn't have been a red. It was just a sloppy performance. But it is the All Blacks we're talking about, and I think they'll be fine. I almost think this will benefit them. I don't think they would have thrown the game on purpose threatening like that, but I think it could just be the kick up the that they need, and this could be great for them, and because now they know what they're going to be up against if they want to, because they could very well be playing South Africa in that quarters. So they know that they'll need to perform better. But I can't believe it. Joe Schmidt. Now I know he's not the head coach, but he is heavily involved, and you can see his his imprints all over the team. Like, how has the Joe Schmidt team let this happen? I don't know.
Well, the stats of the game were bizarre. You tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I didn't think South Africa were particularly special. They were just living off New Zealand's mistakes. I remember in the first half, obviously, they were camped in the New Zealand 22 for like the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
They had a scrum. Off the scrum, it went to Andre Esterhuizen, who crashed it up the middle, and they knocked it on or something, that there was an advantage. And they went to scrum and they just did exactly the same thing again. And the second time they scored. So they weren't, it's not like they were throwing the kitchen sink. Although I imagine being run at by Esterhuizen is like having a kitchen sink thrown at you. It was, and with Moody's couple of tries, one was chalked off, and then Arden's intercept. It wasn't like it was just South Africa, getting on top of the All Blacks' mistakes, and like the stats for the game were so weird. Like South Africa had something like 89 passes, 94. Something like the ratio between their passes and their carries was very similar. So it wasn't a big gap. So it's not like they were chucking it about. It was like one pass contact, one pass contact, one pass contact, which you'd say is very Springboks, but it was ridiculously close. And according to Rugby Pass, the Box missed 39 tackles in that game. Conceded 7 points. Conceded 7 points. Just a bizarre game. It's one of those where it's like it's an anomaly. If it was on a graph, you'd say, "Oh, discount that data point."
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, mate. I don't think that's the real All Blacks. I think we'll see the real All Blacks, but I don't think it's what
exactly. Yeah, they're not going to be that poor, that's for sure. And again, like, it was a World Cup warm up. Like, maybe players have at the back of their mind that they could get hurt. It's not really an overly important game. The weather was shocking. A lot of different factors. But yeah, that the All Blacks they're better than that, and we will see a better All Blacks in the World Cup. I think that's for sure. Moving on to our favorite team, Australia. They're still conceding points and losing games. Are France still favorites for you? I know you said for yourself it was the All Blacks prior to Friday, but a lot of people are obviously saying that it's France are favorites. Like, what are your thoughts on this? Should they be favorites? For me, like, you need to put Australia into perspective. Australia are poor. They are a poor side. We've talked about it on this pod many times. We know that I would certainly argue that it was a terrible decision to sack Rennie and put Eddie Jones in place when he doesn't even have a chance to make a difference and implement the changes that he's wanted to. So, this is pretty standard. He's brought one fly half, and you don't like to slate an up and coming player, but Carter had a poor game. But for me, like France, yeah, they were excellent. They've got some superstars in their team, but they were playing against Australia, who have been poor. They're going into this World Cup with 5 losses from 5 games.
Yeah, my favorite thing about France is their superstars always show up. So like Dante was amazing, Peno was amazing, Ramos was amazing, Dupont was Dupont. All the players that you think, I'm going to get to watch these players tonight, and they always turn up. Like Peno is just ridiculous. Peno is just like, And for one of his tries, the one where they were basically on Australia's try line, and Dupont chooses to crossfield kick it to Peno. He could have passed it normally. There was like a 5-man overlap. It was just showing off. It was just like, look what I can do. And the same with Peno when he got through and he chipped it over the backfield cover. It's just like, stop it. It's not fair. One thing that's going kind of under the radar about France, I've not seen anyone talk about, is that all of their goal kickers are amazing. Like Ramos isn't bad, and the guy that they had come on kicked the goals against Fiji as well the week before. He's even better. It's like when Wales had Dan Biggar and Lee Halfpenny both in the team, had officially statistically the 2 best goal kickers in the world on the pitch together playing for the same team. And now it feels like France have got that now as well. And out of the 4 games that France have played this summer, something like 50% of their points have come off the kicking team. Well, you compare that to Ireland, it's more like 80% of their points is tries. 50% of France's points are kicking for posts, which is very top 14. There's a lot of kicking for posts in that league compared to other leagues. But when you've got goal kickers that good, chip it over. Before you know it, especially these, without being horrible, especially these Southern Hemisphere teams, where the defense isn't that good anyway, and they do quit. Australia do quit in games. They're like looking at the scoreboard like, oh Jesus, it's 20 minutes in, we're 12 points down, and we haven't conceded a try. What's going on? Australia, what can I say? This is the 5th time in 6 matches they conceded 30 or more points in a test match. You don't statistically, laws of probability, you can't concede 30 points and win games. It just doesn't happen ever. 26 points is enough to win 80% of test matches. They're conceding 30 points pretty much every game. Just poor. And the thing, they went 7-1, so on the bench, and the Box did it as well. And everyone was like, oh, what's this going on? 7-1 splits on the bench. I think Eddie and Razzie just did it just for kicks, to be honest. I don't think there was any kind of like, oh yeah, this is the plan. But Eddie didn't bring his bench on, so obviously the Box brought all 7 on at the same time, which was hilarious to watch. Like the poor old 4th official with the board, poor old Tano announcer. But Eddie didn't bring his replacements on until like 70, 75 minutes, end of the game.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, what was the whole point? This is a warm-up game, not a knacker them out game. I don't know. Is it all going to be all right on the night for Australia? There are some people who, in their head, just will not accept Australia are bad and will not accept that Eddie Jones isn't playing 4D chess.
No, they're to me, they'd be doing well to get out of the group. Their discipline as well. And it was the same when he was in charge of being their discipline. Like, they're such a frustrating side to watch. They're not scoring tries. They're conceding like every metric you could possibly measure them on. They're doing poorly on. So but there were obviously during the game a couple of moments where they did quite well, and they do have, I think, some ridiculously good players, but I just don't think they have the right coach in place. And even if Eddie was the right coach for the job, as we said before, he didn't have enough time to make a difference to this team. So no, it's frustrating, I think, but I think Australia and England are going to be like, it's amazing the way Eddie Jones was basically fired from England, hired by Australia. Now England doing poorly, Australia doing, like, nobody's benefited from that situation. I'd say Dave Rennie's just sitting there laughing at the whole situation. And and we discussed last week, didn't we? We brought up the Steve Hansen effect I don't think we saw any change. Now, obviously, look at his I'm sure he hasn't had much time with that yet. But again, as we said probably last week, is he going to have a significant impact on this team? Highly doubtful. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there on Australia. But yeah, France, yeah, talk about superstars. I think almost everybody held their breath when Dupont went down. I think on his knee it might have been, but thankfully he got up and he's fine. Everybody just wants to see him play.
Yeah. Oh my God, if we lose Dupont and Ntamak, just call the whole thing off. It's not worth it. Okay, mate. So last bit of just thought, something we touched on last week, or we'll just touch on it briefly again. The pundits versus fans saga seems to be carrying on. So last week we talked about how all of the pundits suddenly switched towards the end of the previous week, and all of the chat about Owen Farrell and Billy Vunipola and suspensions and things. It's suddenly the narrative was that fans are being abusive, they're attacking players' character. The vitriol has to stop. Social media is killing the game and things. That's now continued into this week, where we've seen there was a Guardian piece that did the rounds, at least on Welsh Rugby Twitter. I don't know where else it did it. The Guardian piece in the UK that went round, where it was the guy who wrote it was talking about how the fans can boo and hiss, and they can talk about how this one head contact was the end of the world, all they like, but it's not going to change anything. They're better off not saying anything at all, which was, a bit off, rubbed some people up the wrong way. And then you've had your man from the Irish Independent, Cian Tracy, has written a piece today where he's talked about an interview that Johnny Sexton gave. It was a press conference that Johnny Sexton gave. But for me, he took Sexton's quote a little bit out of context. So Sexton was being quite taking responsibility for obviously his ban for his interaction with Jacob Piper. And Sexton was being like, look, it's on me. The one thing Sexton was saying is, I don't understand why it was such a long process. They should have got it done within a couple of weeks rather than 8 weeks, which is what it actually took. And he said, I take responsibility, put my hands up. It's my fault. I regret doing it. And he says, it wasn't nice for my family as well, because they were all part of it and they were having to live the circus of it as well. And Cian Tracy has come out and said that, oh, this is the fans again. The fans have made Johnny Sexton's family suffer by attacking his character over what he did. A little bit bizarre for me. What's your take on it, mate? Why, at this point, we're just about to go into a World Cup, and it feels like the written press and the broadcast press are going after the fans. Am I imagining this, or what do you think the reasons are behind it?
I think that there must just be more going on that we're not seeing. Like, I assume Sexton must have been talking about messages that he has been receiving and potentially his family members about the whole situation. Like that could only be it, because I don't think the media is always going to be harsh, I think. And it was, for me, particularly the South African media who really disagreed with the decision and then thought he should get a longer ban. But I didn't think there was anything overly controversial in the media said about him. So it must be your typical trolls sending private horrible messages to him and his family. That must be it. I don't think he elaborated on it or got into it or gave any examples. It's not that he has to, but yeah, it's an interesting narrative. It certainly is. But there must be more going on. I don't think he'd make that up or anything like that. So for me, yeah, there must just be more going on. We know social media can be absolutely toxic. So maybe that's exactly what he was alluding to. Like, we've all heard those examples or seen screenshots of what people just message these superstars, and it's horrific. Remember Ian Keatley gave an interview a couple of years ago. I won't get into it, but like the stuff that was said about him and that was sent to his wife, it was just horrific. So it must be something to do with that. There's no place for it in the game. But it is, yeah, it's interesting to see it come up in the narrative. I think what we should be talking about is the World Cup and performances. And yeah, that's it for me. Hopefully this, yeah, I think, I don't know, what's your take on the whole thing?
I don't know. I think journalists are just knowing where their bread is buttered, to be honest. I think they've gone, I'm going to side with this guy because I need this guy, because whether it's in England, obviously living in the UK, nearly all the media that we see is about England. We don't really see much talk about anybody else. And it's a very, very small world, a very, very small world with a very, very small number of people in it. And they can't be making enemies, they can't be falling out. So I think, a journalist has probably got pressure from his boss that his or her boss, I should say, if you fall out with this guy, if you do a hit piece on this guy, they won't do an interview with you, and then we will sell less papers, we'll get less clicks. I think it's sadly as simple as that. I always use Formula One as either example. Formula One, all the journalists like travel with the teams and the team bosses and the drivers and things to and from Grand Prix, so they don't fall out. They protect one another. I think it's just the nature of it being a small world. It's something that we don't see in football. Football's obviously a much bigger world, and you will see journalists go after individuals, go after teams and things. And just probably a bit too small for that. The one thing that I will say though is, I think turning on the fans is a mistake, because fans will remember, and fans will hold a grudge against you if you stick the boot into them. So it's just a sideshow that we don't need right now as a sport. So I agree with you. We should be talking about the World Cup and this kind of animosity with the media. It's the last thing the sport needs in this day and age.
So I think that's it for the big rugby news of the week.
Yeah, so stick around, guys, to the end of the show when we'll be talking about some of the other games. So in our tier 2 section that we do after the deep dive, we'll be talking about Ireland versus Samoa. We'll be talking about Italy versus Japan, Scotland versus Georgia, and all the other tier 2 results. So stick around for that. But in the meantime, it is deep dive time. So our deep dive this week is going to be on South American Rugby. We have the World Cup coming up, and we need to make sure that we're giving enough attention to everyone who joins it. And we have a record number of South American teams. So I thought it would be an interesting time to jump in and understand a bit more about rugby in South America beyond what we know with Argentina and things, and just educate us all better. So can you see my screen, mate?
And indeed, very smooth this week. Look at us.
Yeah, look at that. So this is my deep dive on South American Rugby, your preview for the 2023 World Cup. Everything that you need to know about Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, and more. So, like I said, we've got a whole three South American teams at the World Cup this time around, which is a record. We've never had more than 2 before. So Argentina, we know about. Argentina have been a huge rugby nation for decades and decades, are a staple fixture, and obviously in the Rugby Championship. Uruguay came onto the scene a few World Cups ago, so this is at least their 3rd World Cup in a row. They were definitely there in 2015 and 2019, played against Wales both times, and they're up in Pool A this time, alongside New Zealand, France, Italy, and Namibia. And then both Argentina and Chile qualifying for the World Cup famously in a dramatic playoff against the USA. If you wanted to know more about that, head over to Squidge Rugby, which I'm sure you already have, and check out all his videos about Chile and things. They're the perfect thing to get up to speed on those guys. So Argentina and Chile are both in Pool D with England, Japan, and Samoa. So just to give us a bit of context then, we're not going to cover Argentina too much in this video because they get a lot of press anyway, being in the Rugby Championship and things. We're a tier 2 show, so we're going to be talking about Uruguay and Chile and maybe a couple of others. So how is everybody getting on? So Uruguay and Chile, like every other World Cup team, have been playing warm-ups this summer, and Uruguay have been going very well. So Uruguay are the only tier 2 nation to win all of their warm-up games. So this is the list of all the tier 2 teams. I've thrown Italy in there as well because Italy don't get enough love or enough coverage over here in the UK. So I've got Italy in there just for context. So Uruguay won 3 out of 3 games. So they've got a 100% winning record, better than Fiji, better than Georgia, better than Samoa. They are arguably the world's form team other than Ireland right now. They know what it's like to win, which is more than he could say for Wales, sadly. Anyway, Chile, on the other hand, they've not been going so well. So Chile have played 4 warm-up games and they've lost every single one of them. And in terms of points difference, only Romania have been going worse. So it's a bit of a worry for Chile at the moment. They really come into this as underdogs, and as we'll see in a moment, they could be in for a tough time. So one thing that I think everybody wonders about these smaller nations, these minnow nations, the likes of Uruguay, Chile, and then people like Namibia, and previously the Pacific Island nations before Moana Pacifica came along, is where do the players come from? You know, where do they play their club rugby? Do they just play domestically in Uruguay and Chile? What's the standard of that like? Is it even professional? Well, I'll tell you. So, as of a few years ago, there is something called the Super Rugby Americas, which is a type of format that we're familiar with. It's similar to URC. It's similar to the Super Rugby, obviously. It's similar to the Rugby Europe domestic competition, which I'm sure we'll talk about on a future show. It was founded in 2020, previously under the SLR name, rebranded to Super Rugby Americas in 2022. And that includes one team from North America, which is the American Raptors. Yes, it's an American team that doesn't play in MLR. They're based out of Glendale in the middle of America. There's 2 Argentina teams, which is the Pampas and the Dogos. There is a Brazilian team, which is the Cobras. Great name. There's a Chilean team, Selknam. There's a Paraguayan team, Yacare. I'm so sorry to all my Spanish-speaking friends. I'm getting all these wrong, but bear with me. And then there's Peñarol from Uruguay. So these are professional teams. This league is looking to go places. There was rumours a couple of years ago about a Canadian team joining. I reached out to a Canadian follower on Twitter for confirmation of that. Didn't get a response, so that looks like it was an idea at some point that died away. Obviously, they've tried to get all of this off the ground right when the pandemic struck, which has obviously held back what they wanted to do. But yeah, it's brilliant that we have this professional league now going on, and it gives the pathway to these players to get to international level. So the 2023 season was won by the Uruguayan side, Peñarol. They won 10 out of the 12 regular games. It's a very normal round robin league style, so it's not split into conferences or anything. It's just everyone plays each other twice. Peñarol dominated, and then they beat the Dogos in the final. And you can see the guys celebrating here. Isn't that nice? So focusing on Uruguay first then. So what I've got here is a graphic representation of Uruguay's results since the last World Cup. So they've played a decent number of games for a tier 2 side. Tier 2 nations play way fewer games than any of the tier 1 teams, which is a huge problem in rugby. But Uruguay play a decent number. They also play a good mix of teams as well. So they've played other South American teams. You can see they played a lot of European teams, some Pacific Nations teams, USA. They played a secret team. Everyone on this list will have played the secret team, and I will tell you all about the secret team towards the end. Yes. So as you can see from the green here in this column, their form this World Cup cycle has been pretty good, and I think a good indicator of the fact that Uruguay are on the up. They're currently 17th ranked in the world, but they're on the up, and I think a good depiction of that is their games against Romania. So they've played since the last World Cup Romania 4 times. They played them away and got beat by 15 points. They then played them at home in a 2-test series. They lost the first by 8 points, and then they won the second by 6 points. And then more recently, they went away to Romania and they won the game by 5 points. So you're seeing this building, you're seeing this improvement. This is what we always say. Give these nations an opportunity to play the more established nations. They will get better, and it's happening right in front of our eyes here. Uruguay were due to host Wales in a 2-match tour when the Lions were on, so in 2021, but Wales backed out of that at the time. The Uruguayan Rugby Union was not happy, complained a lot. They put a lot of planning and preparation into that tour. It would have been the first time that a tier 1 nation would have played in Uruguay, other than Argentina. Wales, to their credit, are normally very good. Well, are very good at playing the tier 2 nations. We always play quite a lot of them, and we're willing to travel to them as well, which is great. But that was a missed opportunity for Uruguay, and I think that stung them a bit. So in terms of tier 1 nations, they haven't played any, unless you count Japan as tier 1. Oh, and they played Italy as well, and they actually gave Italy a good game as well. That was, I think, that was in Italy as well, and came within a score of them. So Uruguay very much on the up. Uruguay, for me, will be the strongest of the tier 2 South American teams going to the World Cup. Moving on to Chile then. So Chile, not so good. So Chile have played the secret team. They've played lots of other South American teams. You can see a slightly different mix of teams here. So you got Paraguay in there. They also played a couple of club teams. So they played Leinster, I think, towards the end of last year. So that's very exciting. They played Brazil, obviously, a few times. They played Scotland at home. Scotland put a big score on them. That was in 2021, while the Lions were on as well. But yeah, so Chile have played again a good mix of teams. Unfortunately, they haven't got the results that Uruguay have got. So Chile are currently on a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 defeats in a row. And like I say, they're not playing the All Blacks in South Africa every week. They're playing mostly other tier 2 nations. You can see here they lost by 29 points to Tonga. And they lost quite heavily to the secret team as well, which I'll tell you more about. So, like I said at the beginning when I showed you the form table, Chile, despite their exciting win against the USA, sadly look like they're going to struggle in the World Cup. And if you can see the 2 USA games here, which are back to back, they lost one by 1 point and they won the other by 2 points. So they went through by 1 point on points difference. And I think USA will be kicking themselves. USA will be absolutely kicking themselves. They've looked okay on their European tour this summer. Big shock. And I think it was an upset. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like Chile have been able to kick on from there. Now, we wish all the best. We all know about their fly half being an incredibly exciting player, scoring unbelievable solo tries. Praying for them in the World Cup. They're ranked 22nd in the world. So obviously 20 teams at the World Cup, they're ranked 22nd. So there are teams ranked above them that aren't going to the World Cup. So yeah, like I say, pray for them. So that's Uruguay and Chile. So who might be the team from South America next to go to a World Cup? Who might be the ones to make it 4 South American teams at a World Cup come 2027? Well, at the moment, the best candidate looks like it's going to be Brazil. So Brazil are ranked 28th in the world. They mostly play other South American teams. You can see they play Portugal here, which is unsurprising. Obviously, there's the common language there. So that's a bit of a transatlantic derby, we'll call it. They've had some decent results. They've been getting better lately, but they are playing, this is where we talk about, is there a tier 3? This is treading the line of Brazil aren't really on the level of the likes of a Georgia or a Tonga. They're not really tier 2. They're arguably a tier 3 team if such a thing exists. So they've played mostly other South American teams. 4 wins in a row, including 1 big win versus Colombia. They also beat Paraguay quite handily as well, and USA reserves. But yeah, not really getting the opportunities at the moment. They are currently playing in a tournament that's being known as, I think, the South American Four Nations, where they're playing against Paraguay, Colombia, and a Chilean B team, both home and away. And they're currently winning that quite easily. So they're showing that they're a cut above that level of opposition. So it's all about getting the opportunities for those guys and getting the progression, and hopefully we'll see them at 2027. So finally, the secret team. So this is a secret rugby team, Ender. They have only lost 2 games since 2019. They've gone unbeaten at home since 2019. They beat someone by 139 points. They defeated Georgia and Portugal away from home in 2022, but they aren't at Rugby World Cup 2023. Any guesses from you, mate, who they are?
I have no idea.
No guesses? The South American?
No guess.
So I am talking about Argentina 15. So this is Argentina's B side. So it's cheating a little bit. They're not a national side, but they do play regular games against all of these teams that I just mentioned. You can see here, this is the list of the games they played that I've been able to find. Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Uruguay B, Georgia, Portugal. Those are the games that they won away from home. Very impressive. And then this summer they played Namibia, Chile twice, and Uruguay. The only team that has beaten them is Uruguay. They've won every other game they've played. They beat Paraguay 146 points to 7. Paraguay, I'm sorry to any Paraguayans who are tuned in, hoping to get their moment in the sun. It's not, they're really not really at this level yet. They've taken some heavy defeats. If you go on Paraguay Rugby's Wikipedia page, all it talks about is the times they've taken 140, 150 points off other tier 2 nations. Colombia is the other South American team we haven't mentioned. Sorry, Colombia, I haven't been able to find that much out about you, and you haven't really beaten anyone noteworthy. So you'll probably, next time we do another video, we'll talk about Colombia and Paraguay. But yeah, so Argentina 15. This is kind of what the Jaguares sort of developed into. So if I go to what it looks like, so this is the Argentina 15 squad. So I think since the Jaguares disappeared from Super Rugby, a lot of people were really worried about where are the Argentinian players going to come from. And Argentina have struggled to recover from that. So Argentina's World Cup squad has an average age of 29. So it's one of the oldest squads. They have multiple players who are like in their late 30s. I think they got one 39 and one 38-year-old player going to this World Cup. So they're using, I think Argentina have recognized that, and they're using Argentina 15, the B team, to get these new players in. So you can see where these players have come from. Most of them have come from the Super Rugby Americas side, the Dogos and the Pampas. Those players are then going into Argentina 15, and then those players then go into the Argentina seniors. So, like I said, the Argentina seniors currently a slightly older team. Most of those players are playing in the top 14 or the Premiership. There's a couple playing in the URC. There's only one Argentina full senior going to the World Cup who goes from Super Rugby Americas. So it's very much a development competition for them. But you can see, like I said, these two domestic teams feeding Argentina 15, who are then going out and playing these games against these nations. So yeah, so that's the secret team. So you'll be able to impress people. So I guess the interesting thing about Argentina 15, and you could also talk about Australia A with this as well, and the New Zealand Maori, is if we go to this global calendar where they're talking about a tier 1 and a tier 2 separate competitions, surely Argentina 15, the Maori and Australia A won't be allowed to play in the tier 2 competition, because that would be basically the tier 1 nation has got 2 teams. So you would get Australia going, sorry, you would get Wales going, we want an A team in there. You would get England Saxons, Irish Wolfhounds going, we want to be able to play a B team in the tier 2 competition. So it's up in the air as to what will happen with these guys. Will they be forced to just arrange friendlies outside of international windows? You'd hope not. That's not going to really do anything for Argentina. So yeah, a big question mark over their future, because at the moment they are, it gives you a good barometer of where the other South American teams are, because Argentina 15 are beating them in some cases quite easily. They beat Chile 14 points to 13. So yeah, kind of a good yardstick for where South American rugby is at this moment in time. So just broadly about talking about trying to get more games into these guys, this is my last point. There was a Six Nations style tournament proposed for South America. So, well, not just South America, for all of America. So it would be the America's Rugby Championship. It would include Canada, USA, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina 15, which sounds thrilling. That sounds exactly the kind of thing that we'd all tune in and watch as fans of Tier 2 rugby. And it sounds like a great way to get these guys progressing. Sadly, again, they tried to get it off the ground in 2020, and the pandemic hit. So that got cancelled, and they haven't been able to get it off the ground again since. I sincerely hope they do. It's exactly the kind of thing that they should be doing. You know, obviously it's a very big place, but it's, as far as rugby goes, with how spread out all the rugby nations are, it is a logical, you know, lines of longitude sort of tournament that they're trying to put in here. So, you know, fingers crossed this happens, and fingers crossed that it's on TV, and so we can all tune in and watch it. So yeah, so that's my deep dive on South American rugby. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Any questions, mate?
Oh man, that was it's fascinating to see. I didn't know that as well, about because that was the big question, wasn't it? When Aguirre's left Super Rugby, or essentially forced to leave Super Rugby, like where, you know, we all struggled to see where they'd go from there. And now to see that they're, you know, they've got this 15 side who are absolutely dominating certain teams, I suppose is good in a way. Like, is it sustainable? I don't know. Like surely they're like, for me, like, how is this financially viable to have a team just traveling around? They're like, I doubt the attendances at these games is great. That's my only concern. And having, you know, for Argentina, I suppose overall, having all these players dotted around the world. I mean, it was great when they were all playing for Aguirre's, but look, it wasn't their decision. They were forced out. So that we are where we are. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how well their Argentina's B team is doing. It does kind of put into perspective as well where Uruguay and Chile are at, isn't it? But very interesting topic.
Paraguay is an interesting one for me because Yacare, or Yasare, I'm so sorry guys, I'm probably pronouncing it all horribly wrong. They're competitive in the Super Rugby Americas, and you would think that their club team and their national team is basically the same team, you would assume. And yet it gets to the international level, and Paraguay are getting hammered, like 100 points put on them. Like Brazil are putting 60 points on Paraguay, and yet Paraguay's domestic team is beating Brazil's domestic team. So I don't know what's gone on there. So if anybody knows there's a story, maybe there's some kind of big scandal in Paraguay about the players refusing to play or something, I don't know, but it's a bit of a mystery. So one for us to find out about, I think. Anyway, so that's South American rugby. Now let's talk about the rest of the Tier 2 internationals from the weekend. So we'll start off, mate, with Samoa against Ireland over in France. Tell me all about that.
A game to forget, I'll put it that way. Look, it was a typical warm-up game for Ireland. They didn't show much. Horrible conditions. Biggest upset, or the biggest probably takeaway from the game from an Irish perspective, and it's not a good one, is that Keane Healy picked up an injury, and that's pretty much, I think he's going to be out now for 5 to 10 weeks, so that's ruled him out of the World Cup, which is extremely disappointing for him and for Ireland, because he was most certainly the backup to Andrew Porter. And I think the scrum now is potentially a weakness for Ireland, potentially, not guaranteed, but you know, Lockman doesn't have much experience yet. Yeah, he doesn't have much experience yet at international level, but maybe it's exactly what he needs. But yeah, that was the big takeaway for me. Samoa, they were pretty good. You know, they played pretty well. It was pretty much their first team. It was not Ireland's first team. But yeah, overall a game to forget. But I think one of the big takeaways as well is that, you know, England need to be slightly concerned about Samoa, for more reasons than one, I guess. I don't think you got a chance to see the game, right?
No, I didn't. I was on a bus traveling back from Twickenham. How did Sopawanga do? Because that was his first official start. He started against the Barbarians the previous week. How much value are him and Christian Leali'ifano bringing to Samoa? And it looked like their scrum went pretty well as well.
Yeah, and again, speaking of set piece, we said the same thing about Fiji, didn't we? Like it's essential that these you know, teams have a strong set piece. That's like, if you look at your Springboks, your Irelands, your All Blacks, what do they do really well? It's the basics, and they've got a ridiculously strong set piece. And yeah, it did pretty well. It hung in there. Again, wasn't Ireland's, you know, it's not Ireland's starting front row, but they still, they perform well. And yeah, to see these players come back and play is, you can see their influence. You can see how, other players are definitely going to be learning from them, that they've all that experience. And yeah, it's just brilliant to see. I think those players getting those opportunities to go back and play for them. But yeah, again, biggest takeaway for me, apart from the Irish perspective, is England are going to be worried.
England have got Samoa last, so if England lose to Argentina up front, you'd think they'd have too much for the other two teams in their pool, and then they got winner takes all game against Samoa, assuming Samoa also lose to Argentina. What a game that could be! What a game that could be! Speaking of other people in Pool D, Italy played Japan in Italy at the weekend. A comfortable win for Italy in the end, although a couple of late tries put some gloss on the scoreboard. Do people need to accept that this isn't 2019 Japan anymore, and that they have sadly gone backwards a bit in the last 4 years?
Unfortunately, I think so. Judging by their most recent results anyway, that certainly seems to be the case. Like, let's not forget that Japan beat Ireland in the group stages in 2019. Based on their most recent results, they don't stand a chance against some of these tier one, sides. Yeah, it's sad to see. What are the reasons? We don't know. Like, I'm sure it's multifaceted. I know a couple of people have touched on Sunwolves no longer participating in Super Rugby. Like the Japan, is it Japan 1 League is what they call it? You know, they've got some absolute superstars. Is it doing anything? Is it feeding into the national team? I don't know. They've got a second tier competitions to renew well. Like Freddie Burns is leaving the Highlanders now, and he's going over there for 2 seasons, signed in the Japan second league. So like, obviously there's money there and everything. Yeah. So yeah, it's disappointing, isn't it, to see them go that way. Now we know Italy, like, to be fair as well, have come on. Like, I think, but when you look at Italy's group, they don't stand a chance. But Italy are definitely improving. But Japan, mate, they don't seem to have kicked on. Hopefully they'll cause maybe a few surprises at the World Cup, but I just can't see it.
Yeah, after the last World Cup, if I'd have said to you Italy versus Japan, who wins? Most people would have said Japan, but Italy won it quite easily. Italy this summer scored the most points out of all of the Six Nation teams in their summer. Now that was propped up a bit by a big win against Romania, but it's nice to see Italy get a bit of confidence about them, rather than, unfortunately playing against teams that it's in the top 5 teams in the world and getting beat every week. It's nice to see them with a smile on the face, and Capuozzo and Garbisi enjoying life. Paolo Odogwu as well, playing now on the wing for Italy as well. Fair play to him. Next game then, Scotland versus Georgia. I didn't catch so much of this. Georgia leading 6-0 at half time.
Cracking half.
Yeah, cracking. So hang on, I think I get this right. So I think Georgia, Samoa, and Fiji obviously either led at half time or won this weekend against tier 1 opposition all the way from home. And we'll talk about as Portugal versus Australia A in a minute. Portugal were leading that game as well. So that talks about the closing of the gap. But I don't know, was it Scotland just didn't turn up? What? Because in the second half they blew them away. So was it just didn't switch on?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of a couple of things, but yeah, the overall theme is that Scotland's were just completely asleep. It was their last warm up game. They probably thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. Probably just a bit of complacency, but I wouldn't read too much into the results. We know Scotland about that. They proved that in the second half. But yeah, good to see Georgia hanging in there for 40 minutes. But yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that one. Kind of more interesting for me of these kind of tier 2 international fixtures again was Australia A versus Portugal. And, we saw Australia again struggle in another warm-up game. And who was playing in this game? Bernard Foley and James O'Connor. To me, And did you read the Hooper story as well? Like the fact, like how, I don't think we really touched on that before, how Hooper didn't.
So I thought Michael Hooper was out because he was injured. But now there's this story going around that he was bringing negativity, and he was toxic or something to the group. Is that what it's been?
I think it might have been something like that, or that. Yeah, I think I saw the word arrogance being thrown around. Not or arrogant really, like not the word I would ever associate with him, especially everything I've read on him. Like he seems like he's a bloody brilliant player, even all anything like that aside. But it's the first I've ever heard of that kind of stuff. But again, it's coming from Eddie Jones' environment. So yeah, I don't know. It's all speculation, isn't it? But I'm sure it'll come out eventually. But how he's not in that squad is just beyond me. No matter what's going on there, like yeah, but yeah, for me, seeing Bernard Foley and like when I looked at those squads, see Bernard Foley and James O'Connor playing from Australia, yeah, it's just even if they weren't going to start, why not have them in the squad as a backup? Like it's
Foley's
it's been
playing over
crazy.
in Foley's playing in Japan at the moment. I think I want to say he plays for Sungoliath. He might have just left. Or just got that wrong. I'm not sure where James O'Connor's playing. Is he playing in the top 14 these days? No, he can't be. He'd be back with them.
I think it's Super Rugby last I heard.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I think
playing for
I
one
think
of the
that's where
many
he still is.
terrible Australian Super Rugby teams. Okay, and then the final tier 2 game before we get into some of the league stuff. Spain lost to Argentina by 60, and like we covered just slightly earlier, Argentina 15 beat Chile again. So that concludes all of the international matches. Onto the Pro de Deux then. Taffs abroad. I won't take as long on this as I did last week. Ross Moriarty scored for Brive, as they won. Stuart Olding started at fullback, and Sam Johnson, formerly of Scotland, was in the centre. Again, that's a mad squad. You'd expect these guys to be pushing for promotion. Sam Davis's Grenoble lost, but Sam Davis, formerly of Dragons and Ospreys, of course, is currently the second top scorer in the Pro de Deux, and I can very much see him going on to be the top scorer in that division with his goal kicking and the fact that he availability is one of his best abilities. He didn't miss many games for the Dragons or the Ospreys. And then final story from Taffs Abroad this week is Rhys Webb. Now we need to be careful. We don't want to get sued. This story broke around midday, or when I saw it, it was around midday on Saturday, and it was gone through many iterations since then. So I'll just try and break it down. L'Équipe in France, which is a big newspaper, reported that Rhys Webb had tested positive for an illegal growth hormone in a random drugs test. He had been suspended by Biarritz, and that L'Équipe had gone so far as to say that Rhys Webb had been given this performance-enhancing drug by the WRU. Obviously, that is a huge allegation, and if true, is completely like, oh my god, I thought we had enough scandals, guys. Like, please no. I'm reading this like, please just be the French throwing grenades. Since then, L'Équipe have walked back on the WRU accusation. They have taken that out of their story. Rhys Webb's suspension from Biarritz has gone from being he's suspended to he's been provisionally suspended whilst they investigate. And it has gone from he has taken this drug to he showed a marginally higher level of a hormone, which can be related to this drug. So there's been throughout the course of Saturday, there was a pretty major walk back in the press from what was originally said. And it finally ended up with now, apparently, I read, Rhys Webb is seeking legal support to tackle this. So obviously he's not lying down and taking it. Obviously, a lot of people on Twitter jumped to conclusions on this. A lot of people got very excited and got a bit shouty. Some fairly big Twitter accounts saw the first story and, we're talking about the WRU and what they've been doing. There were some pictures of, obviously, we all saw the pictures of the Welsh players when they were in their training camps and all looking shredded. They were going, well, that'll be why they've been on the juice. That's been a bit of a bad look, and I think a lot of those tweets have since been deleted. I've seen some journalists tweeting some of these Twitter accounts saying, I'd take this down if I were you, because you might find out yourself with a defamation lawsuit. So we won't talk about it too much. I won't ask for your opinion, mate, just in case, because we don't really know. But
yeah, that's exactly it. We don't know.
I just wanted to float out there that the story that originally broke has modified since. Anyway, so just to close off on Pro D2 then, Provence lead the way with Von in the standings. They're the only two teams with 100% records. Grenoble are bottom of the league, but they had a points deduction for financial breaches. Don't expect them to be bottom of the table because they nearly got into the top 14 last season. They played in the access match. Some people may remember. So yeah, so that's the Pro D2, mate. What about the main story at the top 14? Unfortunately, you didn't get to watch any of it because it wasn't on in Ireland. But yeah, have you been able to catch up with the results, mate? What happened?
Yeah, so I did catch up on the results. So I saw that Toulouse battered Montpellier. I think it was you who pointed me out. I didn't even realize that Entomac had a brother, and you were saying that he was playing, carving it up for them. I think he's an open side. Is that right?
He played number 7. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so incredible. Unsurprising, I suppose. With that name, you just got to be a world class player, don't you? We saw La Rochelle, come back and they beat Lyon. We saw Clermont Perpignan. Alwyn Jones, Toulon beat Bayonne. We saw Pau beat Racing, which is interesting as well. Like I know we've been rather controversially. Stuart Lancaster's left Leinster. I think he's, from what you honestly, anything you read coming out of that Leinster camp was that he was an absolutely ridiculously good coach. So I'm sure we'll see Racing do better. Like maybe it's a language thing. Maybe it's going to take a while to get his feeling. I think he will. I think we'll see more from Racing with him in there, but it's probably just going to take him a bit longer. And look, it's only in round 2. Interesting enough, Stade Francais is sitting top of the table. They had a win against Oyonnax, I believe. So they're currently the only unbeaten team, and Perpignan are bottom. So yeah, it's interesting to see what's going on. But yeah, it's mad that we're through 2 rounds already. We've got round 3 coming up this weekend, which is part of the only rugby that's on.
It's mad that after 2 rounds, there's only one team that's won both games. That's unusual for a sport, let alone rugby. And yeah, a couple of batterings this weekend, like you said. Very on top 14. Normally a very close league. You don't normally see many one-sided affairs. So NPC next then. So Northland, it was another thriller with Northland in it. It was Tasman last time. This time Northland didn't win. It was an unbelievable game. It was 2 swings in momentum, huge swings on the scoreboard. They were playing against Manawatu, and Manawatu Turbos, I believe they're known as, won it in the final moments. So it was ultimate drama, and there was even a TMO call for like a potential forward pass on the final try and everything. So it finished 31-30 to Manawatu. They turned it over with the clock in the red on the halfway line, ran down the other end, one side of the pitch to the other, scored in the corner, huge celebrations. Weather looks miserable. But yeah, a thrilling and unbelievable game to watch. I think Northland had multiple yellow cards in the first half. We're down to 13 men at one point, and then we're leading it with the clock in the red. So yeah, you want to tune in and watch Northland guys when they're on in the morning, because it seems like it's a thriller every time. And then just to round off everything else NPC wise, so there was a lot of high scoring games. If you want to check out what all the scores were, I recommend using Flash Score. They've got all the scores there, and you can quickly and a couple of taps see what's happened. But in terms of the rankings, Wellington are top on points difference from Taranaki, and Southland sadly sit at the bottom. Okay, mate. What about the Scottish Super 637? How did they go on this weekend?
So I'm going to butcher who's sitting on top of the Super 6, not the Super 6, I should say the Super 6. The Super Series, I believe, isn't it? There we go.
What is it?
Got there.
It's like FOSROC.
It's so it's the sponsor. So it's Fosrock Super Series, I believe, is the. We could just go with Super, not 6.
Yeah.
So it's Ayrshire.
Ayrshire.
Who are Ayrshire, who are sitting top, I believe, after beating the Bears. Heriots are in second after beating the Future 15, who remain winless, unfortunately. And I guess the other competition I just wanted to touch on briefly as well as the Women's Interpros in Ireland. So the final's actually coming up this coming Saturday, and it's going to be a rematch between Leinster and Munster, who actually just played in the weekends. And to be honest, it was a big upset. Leinster beat Munster 26-19. So they're going to be playing each other in the final. Connacht did finish the season on a high, and they were 29-24 victors against Ulster. So it's good to see them finishing on it. But yeah, so next week I'll touch on it, both of the games. So there's obviously going to be the final, but there's also going to be that rematch between Connacht and Ulster on TV as well, which does move us on to this coming weekend, sports-wise and on TV and rugby, because there isn't a whole lot on, because we're that close to the start of the World Cup, which is pretty bloody exciting. So starting on Wednesday, so Sky Sports have changed things up this week. They are still showing that Wednesday fixture. So on Wednesday morning, we have got a game between Auckland and Manawatu on Sky Sports Action at 5 minutes past 8. And then the next rugby game that we're going to be able to see in our screens is on Friday, again at 8:05, and it's another NPC game between Northland and Hawke's Bay, and again that's on Sky Sports Action. And now, the only other Friday night game we have this coming weekend is Watsonians in the Super Not 6 series. Watsonians playing Heriots on Scottish Rugby YouTube at 7:35. And then the rest of the weekend's games are all on Saturday. So starting with the Interprovincial Series first. So we have the final, as I mentioned, that's kicking off at 4:45 between Munster and Leinster. That's on TG Car for anybody who is interested in watching that game, who's based outside of Ireland. That game is not going to be geo-blocked, so you can watch on the TG Car player. And also before that, at 2 o'clock, Ulster will be playing Connacht. What else is going on Saturday? Well, we have the top 14. So again, they've changed things up quite a bit this weekend again. So there'll be 4 games on in the UK. Compared to last weekend, there are actually going to be 2 games on in Ireland, which is good. But starting with the first fixture, ONR playing Toulouse on Viaplay Sports 1 at 2 p.m. As I said, that game is only on Viaplay. It's not on Premier Sports. Next game is on Saturday, and that's at 4. And that's the Stade Francais against Montpellier on Viaplay Sports 2. Again, not being shown in Ireland, frustratingly. Then it's a Saturday evening game with Clermont v Roland Garros La Rochelle. That's on Viaplay Sports 2, and it's also being shown on Premier Sports 2 in Ireland. And finally, the last game of the weekend will see Bordeaux play Toulon on Viaplay Sports 2 and Premier Sports 2 in Ireland. So as you probably noticed there, compared to the last 2 weeks, Sky Sports have chosen to just show 2 NPC games, which is disappointing when there's so little rugby on. But at least there's some on, and I've taken you through them there. So we've got 2 days of rugby coming up, which isn't too bad. And well, we'll say two days and a bit with that Wednesday morning fixture. So that's it, in terms of our rugby fixtures, and that brings us to the end of another pod. You have any final words?
No, just obviously to let the guys and girls listening to know that if anything does change with the broadcasting, they can check out yourself on Twitter at Rugby TV Guide. If you are listening on the audio version of this podcast and you didn't see what I was showing earlier, you can either head to our Substack and there will be a type up of it. There will be also a link to the YouTube version. And I have no doubt there will be a thread dropping on Twitter, on the Pirate Rugby Twitter as well this week. So yeah, follow us in all the good places, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Go Fiji, but not against Wales, thanks. And yeah, have a great week, guys. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.